Good morning. We'd like to welcome you to another edition of the Sunday School Review. This week's Sunday School lesson is entitled God's Promise to David. It's taken from 2 Samuel, the 7th chapter, verses 4 through 17. And that is Samuel, this 2 Samuel. The author here is unknown. And it's this book here, this lesson here is talking about, ultimately is talking about Jesus Christ, who is the heir of David. So God's promise to David. And it's in the 7th chapter. Our lesson again starts at verse 4. But we're going to look at verses 1 through 3 to kind of set the stage here, what's going on, the question that is being addressed in this lesson. And verse 1 of chapter 7, it tells us, it came to pass when David sat in his house, the Lord had given him rest around about from all his enemies. So it was a time, it was not a time of war. Now, David was a man, a warrior. He was a man of war. But at this particular time, David was actually resting in his house in Jerusalem. Okay. And that's what the first verse said. And they was at peace. It was a peacetime. There was no war going on. Verse 2. Okay, that the king said unto Nathan, Nathan is the prophet. That is, David, the king, said unto Nathan the prophet, okay, Nathan the prophet, see now, I dwell in a house of cedar. Now, at that time, cedar was the best wood. So David's house in Jerusalem was the finest. He had the best. He was resting comfortably in his nice house, cedar house in Jerusalem. And so he said, but the ark of God dwelleth within curtains. So the ark of the covenant, which represented the presence of God, was in a tent, okay, on poles behind curtains. So when David compared his house, a cedar house, as I said, with the best wood, he compared that to where the presence of God was in a tent on poles behind a curtain. There was no comparison. So this is what that's David reflected. This, like I said, was a time of peace. So it was a time when David was able to reflect on his life and how God had blessed him. So, and verse 3 says, and Nathan said to the king, go, do all that is in thine heart, for the Lord is with thee. Now, here's the situation here. So David revealed his plan to the prophet Nathan. That is to build the Lord a house, or place to house the Ark of the Covenant, which again represented the presence of God. So when David revealed his plan to Nathan the prophet said, go ahead, go do it. Now, here's something we want to note here. Neither Nathan nor David consulted the Lord. They did not seek divine intervention. David nor Nathan. When Nathan heard the plan, he said, go do it. He didn't say, well, have you sought the Lord about this? Or I'm going to seek the Lord. No one thought to seek divine intervention. The plan that David had was a good idea, but that was his plan, not God's plan. And we're going to see in this lesson that God had a different plan. That was not God's plan. That was David's plan. And he did not seek divine intervention as it relates to this plan. So, what do we take away from that? The scripture tells us in all of our ways and all of our doing, acknowledge the Lord and he will direct our path. So, we should acknowledge God and before we go ahead and do things. In all your ways, acknowledge him. And that was missing out of these first three verses here. So David had the plan was good. The plan wasn't bad. It was not a bad idea. Compared to David's house, as I said, the best, made out of the finest wood at the time, cedar. So his house compared to the dwelling of the Lord in a tent behind some curtains on a pole, basically, there's no comparison. The Lord, in David's mind, the Lord deserves better than that. Which again, as I said, that's a good notion. That's a good thought. But does it line up with the will of God? And we're going to find out it did not line up with the will of God. Now, our lesson starts at verse 4, and this is the first of our lesson. There are three outlines in our lesson. The first outline is verses, that is chapter 7, verses 4 through 7. A noble plan redirected. The plan that David had was noble, but we're going to find out it was redirected. That's verses 4 through 7. The second outline is a gracious reminder. That's verses 8 through 11b of the 7th chapter. The third outline is a gracious promise. That is verses 11c through 17 of the 7th chapter of 2 Samuel. Let's begin with our first outline. That is a noble plan redirected. Let's look at starting at verse 4. And it came to pass that night that the word of the Lord came unto Nathan, saying, Go and tell my servant David, Thus said the Lord, shall thou build me a house? Should I build me a house for me to dwell in? Okay, that's a question, really. Okay, verse 6. Whereas I have not dwelt in any house since the time I brought up the children of Israel out of Egypt, even to this day, but have walked in a tent and in a tabernacle. Verse 7. In all the places wherein I walked with all the children of Israel, spake I a word with any of the tribe of Israel whom I commanded to feed my people, saying, Why build ye not me a house of cedar? So basically, the Lord is saying, of all the time I've dwelt in the tabernacle, in the tent, in the tabernacle, I never requested one. I never requested to have a house built for me. So, but the idea now, and we're gonna go to the second outline. So the Lord spoke to Nathan and told him basically, I do not want David to build me a house, because David, even though David was a man after God's own heart, okay, David was Israel's greatest king. He reigned over Israel for 40 years. He had a pretty long reign, and he was a man after God's own heart. So the thing, even though all of those things were true, the Lord did not want David to build him a house because he was a man of war and he had blood on his hands. So he did not want him to build him a house. Now we're going to get to in the lesson and we're going to talk about it. But now David's son, Solomon, was able to build it, even though David gathered the material. David gathered all the material to build this temple at Jerusalem, but he did not himself build it. Okay, and of course, it was the finest material that David gathered. He gathered all the material, but he was not allowed to build it. The Lord did not want him to build it. And this was David's thought was to build it. And it was a noble, that's what the lesson said, a noble plan redirected. It was a noble idea. It was a good idea, but it was David's plan and not God's plan. And this is the takeaway again, is that we want to be in the will of God. That did not line up with God's will. And the second outline starts at verse 8. And it's a gracious reminder. And here, it's 3 points, 3 key things that the Lord is reminding David of. The things that he did for David. Okay, verse 8. Now, therefore, shalt thou say unto thy servant David. Okay, he's telling Nathan, say this to David. Tell David this. Thus said the Lord of hosts, number one, first thing, I took thee from the sheepcote, from following the sheep, to be a ruler over my people Israel, over Israel. So basically from a shepherd person, a shepherd, to a ruler over Israel. I did this for you. In other words, you was just a shepherd boy. I took thee from the sheepcote, from following the sheep, to be a ruler over my people. This is one thing I did. And number 9 says, and I was with thee wherever thou wentest. I never forsook you. I was with you. I have cut off all thine enemies out of their sight. This is what he did for him. He said, I was with you. I cut off all thine enemies out of their sight. I have made thee a great name, like unto the name of the great men that are in the earth. Now, as I said, what David had a noble plan. Now, even though God did not allow him to build a house, God is letting him, that's not a rejection of you, David, okay? I'm going to do something great for you, and we're going to see that in the lesson. I'm going to do something great for you. I'm not rejecting you. I'm just saying no to this plan because it doesn't line up with my will. But I've done great things for you. And verse 9 said, I was with thee wherever you went, and made thee a great name, like unto the names of the great men that are in earth. So it's not a rejection. You don't have to feel bad. Oh, the Lord rejected me. No, he didn't reject you. Like he did Saul. He didn't reject you. That's not what he's saying here. Okay, well, let's go to verse 10. Moreover, I will appoint a place for my people Israel, and I will plant them that they may dwell in a place of thine own and move no more, neither shall the children of wickedness afflict them any more as before time. Verse 11, and since that time that I commanded judges over my people Israel, and have caused thee to rest from all thine enemies. Now, basically, I brought you from taking care of sheep to be a ruler over Israel. Okay? over my people Israel. That's one thing I've done for you. I have been with you. Verse 9 tells you, I was with you wherever you went. And verse 10 said, I gave you peace. And let's read that again. Moreover, I will point to a place of my people, and I will plant them that they may dwell in a place of their own. Move no more, neither shall the children of Israel be afflicted. Okay, it's verse 11 that speaks about the peace. And since that time, I have commanded judges to be of my people Israel, and have caused thee to rest from all thine enemies. So I was with you, brought you from the sheepcote. I was with you every step of the way, and now I have given you rest. Okay, so I gave you rest. Okay, and that promise, that is rest, is a promise of all who believe. He will give you rest. The believer can rest in Jesus. They can rest. He said, I gave you rest from all your enemies. Verse 11, I've given you rest from all thine enemies. Okay, that's the first outline. The second outline starts with 11b. 11b. The first outline went all the way to 11. Well, actually, starts 11c. The first outline went to 11b. And the second outline starts at 8. Well, okay, yeah, starts at 8. Okay, the second outline starts at verse 8. So the second outline is a gracious reminder. That's a gracious reminder, and it's the 3 points that I mentioned: the fact that he took him from the sheepcote, the fact that he'd been with them, and the fact that he gave them rest. Those are the 3 things that the second outline points out that I have done for you. Took you from the sheepcote, okay, been with you wherever you went, and gave you peace or rest from all of your enemies. Now, okay, we start with the third outline. The third outline starts at 11c. Okay, the third outline starts at 11c. Okay, and let's read that. And also the Lord telleth thee that he shall make thee an house. So David had this noble plan to build a house for the Lord, that is, for the Ark of the Covenant, which meant represent the presence of God. So, and you've heard the idea somebody one up you. So the Lord is saying, I'm going to do better than this. You're talking about building me a house, I'm going to build you a house. So the Lord is saying, I'm going to build, David, I'm going to build you a house. You talking about building me a house? No, I didn't ask for a house. We talked about that in the first outline. I never a house to be built for me. That's what he said. Okay, in verse 7, we read that. I never asked for a house to be built, but you want to build me a house? Okay. And in the third outline, he said, the Lord telleth thee that he will make thee a house. I'm going to one up you. I'm going to build you a house. Not you build me a house. I'm going to build you a house. This is what I'm going to do for you. And the house that the Lord is talking about building for David is an everlasting kingdom. The kingdom of David is everlasting. So I'm going to build you an everlasting kingdom. Now, when David had this noble plan to build a Lord a house, he didn't have in mind, well, the Lord, I want an everlasting kingdom. That was not in David's mind. But the Lord said, you talking about building me a house? I'm going to one up you. I'm going to build a house for you. And that house or that the kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom, because And that fulfillment, and we're going to talk about it again, but that fulfillment is in Jesus Christ, because Jesus Christ is a direct descendant of David. So a descendant of David will sit on the throne forever in the person of the Messiah, Jesus Christ. So I'm going to build you an everlasting kingdom. This is what I'm going to do for you. Okay, so verse 11c says, and the Lord telleth thee that I will make thee a house, which as again is an everlasting kingdom. Verse 12, and when thy days be fulfilled, and thou sleep with thy fathers. In other words, when you're dead, okay, David, I will set up thy seed after thee. That is Solomon. And we know, as I said earlier, David gathered the material to build the house or build the temple at Jerusalem, but David was not allowed to build it. His son Solomon was. And verse 12 said, I will set up thy seed after thee, which is Solomon, okay, which shall proceed out of thy bowels, and I will establish his kingdom. That is Solomon's kingdom. He shall build a house for my name. So as I said, David, the plan was noble, but the Lord did not want David to build it because he was a man of war. So, but he allowed David's son, Solomon, who succeeded him, to build the house at Jerusalem. And 12, and I will establish his kingdom. That is Solomon's kingdom. Okay, verse 13. He shall build an house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. As I say, we're talking about the descendants. So we're talking about the everlasting kingdom. The kingdom of David is everlasting. Jesus Christ, the fulfillment. So this promise to David is an everlasting kingdom. A descendant of David, which is Jesus Christ, will sit on this king, will rule on this king forever. Okay, let's go back to 14. I will be his father, and he shall be my son. If he commit adultery, I will chasten him with the rod of men and with the stripes of the children of men. Now, this is talking about Solomon, what he will do. So basically, he will not rip the throne away from Solomon. I mean, from the ancestry of David. I mean, if there's any wrong, he will be punished. He will be chastised. Now, the kingdom was taken from Saul, the first king. Okay. So, and David, as I said, was Israel's greatest king. He reigned for 40 years and was a man after God's own heart. And the throne of David, the kingdom of David, this promise to David is an everlasting kingdom. So verse 14 is talking about Solomon. I mean, if he commit iniquity, I will chasten him. I will chasten him. This is if he do error. And verse 15 said, but my mercy shall not depart away from him as I took it from Saul. As I said before, he, even though if there's wrong, he will be punished or chastised. But 15 says, my mercy shall not depart from him as I took it from Saul. Saul being the first king. He took it from Saul because Saul did wrong, okay? Whom I put away before thee. So the kingdom was rendered from Saul. But he's saying that even if Solomon err, I will not take the kingdom away. He's going to be punished, but I will not take the kingdom away. That's verse 15. Let's go to verse 16. And thine house and thy kingdom, that is David's kingdom, the extension of David's kingdom, be established forever before thee. Thy throne shall be established forever. And that is talking about Jesus Christ, who is a direct descendant of David. So David's kingdom will be forever. David's kingdom is an everlasting kingdom. The fulfillment of this promise. This is the promise to David, God's promise to David. And that promise to David was an everlasting kingdom. And the ultimate fulfillment of that is Jesus Christ. That's the fulfillment of that. Whereas Jesus is a direct descendant of David. That was verse 16. Said, thy throne shall be established forever. That is the throne of David. So when David was thinking about building God a house, he said, I'm going to one up you. I'm going to build you a kingdom. And that kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom. So a descendant of David, which we know is Jesus Christ, will reign on that throne forever. So David's kingdom is an everlasting kingdom. That is God's promise to David. And verse 17 said, according to all these words and according to all this vision, so did Nathan speak unto David. So yes, David had a noble idea, but that idea was not God's plan. That plan was not God's plan. That was redirected. So again, the takeaway is neither men, David nor Nathan, the prophet Nathan, consulted the Lord. And as I said, the scripture tells us, in all of your ways, consult God, because our will, our plan should line up with the will of God, which it did not in this case. That's why God had to, it was a noble idea, but God redirected that plan. And as I said in the second outline, well, actually the first outline, when God said, I'm going to build, you talking about building me a house, I'm going to build a house for you. And that house is an everlasting kingdom, which will have no end, and which will have no end. So God's plan was not David's plan. God's plan was not David's plan. So we ought to seek God, and whatever we want to do, we need to seek God and see what his plan is for us. Okay, God will acknowledge God in all your ways. He will direct your path. God's promise to David, that's our lesson. And God's promise to David was that of an everlasting kingdom that will last forever. And we know that fulfillment, the ultimate fulfillment of that is the Messiah, that is Jesus Christ. That's our lesson today. We'd like to thank you for watching. We ask you to join us next week for another edition of the Sunday School Review. Thank you.